I know that after spending hundreds of billions of dollars and after witnessing hundreds of thousands of deaths, Joe Biden did not just come out and admit Ukraine had zero chance to win this war. In the first interview with Joe Biden after he finished his presidency, he said the quiet part out loud and admitted Ukraine had absolutely no chance of winning this war unless NATO got involved.
But they sometimes say that you didn't have the courage to go all the way to let Ukraine win. You let them stop the invasion, but you didn't give them the weapons they needed, the long-range weapons, to really win.
Well, a few people do say that, but the idea that they could win without engaging NATO in a war, NATO having engaged the Soviet Union, former Soviet Union, Russia, is not likely. We gave them everything they needed to provide for their independence, and we were prepared to respond more aggressively if, in fact, Putin moved again.
However, in order for NATO to be involved, that would mean that Ukraine had to join NATO. And the Biden administration personally made sure, more than one time, that Ukraine was never made a part of NATO. Now, since this war started, the United States has sent at least $175 billion in aid to Ukraine to help in this war they had no chance of winning. And the UK has sent anywhere from $15 to $17 billion in aid to Ukraine as well. And all that has led to is about 100,000 deaths of Ukrainian soldiers. And we don't even know if that number is accurate because Ukraine refuses to release the actual number. Now, I mentioned the US and the UK specifically because the US and the UK are essentially the reason this war was started. Because it was the US that overthrew the government of Ukraine in 2014 and then subsequently continued to put pressure on Zelensky to ask for accession to NATO. And it was the UK's very own Boris Johnson who personally took a trip out there to make sure that any potential peace deal was dead on arrival. And of course, we all know that this war would be over tomorrow if the United States stopped funding Ukraine. But what Biden is telling us is that he spent hundreds of billions of dollars and effectively threw the lives of hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians in the garbage, into the meat grinder, if you will, for a war he knew they wouldn't win because he personally knew they were never going to allow Ukraine to join NATO, which means NATO was never going to officially enter the war. Now, despite this revelation that isn't really a revelation, he says that if Ukraine gives Russia any land, even if it means achieving peace, that would be tantamount to modern day appeasement.
President Trump is now saying, look, if you want peace, Ukraine is going to have to give up some territory. Some people think that is common sense to say that. Do you think it's not common sense? It's perhaps modern day appeasement?
It is modern day appeasement. Look, listen to what Putin said when he talked about going from Kyiv into Ukraine and why. He believes it's part of Mother Russia. He believes in historical rights to Ukraine. He talks about Eastern Europe. What this man wants to do is reestablish the Warsaw Pact. He can't stand the fact that the Russian dictatorship that he runs, that the Soviet Union has collapsed.
Understand that choice of words was deliberate. Appeasement is a reference to World War II in Nazi Germany, because when Hitler decided to reintroduce conscription and remount his army, he was violating the Treaty of Versailles. And instead of holding him accountable, the Allied powers, specifically the United States and Britain, decided to allow it to happen. In fact, the UK entered a deal with Germany to make sure that their naval force could reach the capacity, 33% of the capacity of the British Navy. So during the week of VE Day, during the week of Victory Day in Russia, Joe Biden is comparing Russia to Nazi Germany. The irony being, there would be no VE Day or Victory Day without Russia, and also the fact that the US, the UK, and the NATO powers are sending money to neo-Nazis. Even though he admits they can't win the war without NATO, and even though it was Biden's administration effectively that has denied Ukraine entrance into NATO time and time and time again. So Biden has no answer as to what a path to peace would look like between Russia and Ukraine. But he does know 100% Ukraine has no chance to win this war. Bro, I know we love to say that the United States loves never-ending wars, but come on, bro, this is a little bit too on the nose. And if I was one of those people who actually was supportive of sending our tax dollars over to the Ukraine because you thought they had a chance of winning, I would be demanding a refund right about now because you got played.